Good evening, one and all. I'd like to welcome you to our school board meeting this afternoon. We would like to call our meeting to order, and I would invite each of you to stand with us and join with us in reciting our Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we have had one request. Is this going to work here tonight? We've had one request to speak to item 1.0. Judy, would you like to say something?
Good evening, board members and superintendent and staff. Again, thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak. You know, we just said the Pledge of Allegiance, and it's so meaningful when we think of all the words to what we just recited. Oh, can you hear me now? Oh, let me repeat it. Good evening. Okay. Good evening, fellow board members. We just recited the Pledge of Allegiance, and we've been doing it for, since we had the Betsy Ross our flag. And it has so much meaning behind it. I don't know if you've ever heard, there was one comedian, and he kind of mentioned how the kids recite the Pledge of Allegiance, and every sentence meant something. It was a Red Skelton, it was so meaningful. I don't know if any of you ever heard or saw that, but so meaningful what Red Skelton did when we said the pledge. And we want our kids to be good citizens, and the way we can do that, as we did it tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance, I think we can share that with every classroom. I think we probably have some teachers here to have the opportunity every morning when they start the classroom to start the first thing in the morning with the Pledge of Allegiance after the bell rings and they all sit in their chairs. So you're a good representative, good examples, and if we can take that example and put it in the classroom, I think that would be awesome. Make great citizens out of all our kids in the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Item 2.0 on our agenda this evening is communications. Superintendent Cole, do we have any written communications?
You have two new written communications in front of you. There is a photocopy of an article out of California by the Sentinel, and there is a letter to the board and myself from a physician at Access Family Medicine.
Okay, thank you. We'd also like to remind all participants here this evening that they would like to speak to a specific action item. There are blue cards in the back. We have received a number of them here, and we will address those items as they come up on our agenda. We'd also like to remind or ask everyone who's here tonight to please sign in for the purposes of contact tracing in case we do suffer further COVID outbreak from our meeting, or if we suffer a COVID outbreak from our meeting this evening. Item 2.3 is our financial report.
I meant to remove that from the agenda. I apologize.
That's okay. Thank you. Item 3.0 then is our consent agenda. We have our approval of our August 24th board agenda for this evening, as well as 3.2 approval of our August 10th, 2021 board draft minutes. We have a motion to approve those two items.
Member DeLaGrange moves to approve.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Member DeVille seconds.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. The motion carries. Item 4.0 are reports. So 4.1, enrollment update. Director Evans and Director Zatola.
Good evening. I don't know if I'm loud enough. I'll speak up. We just wanted to give you a little heads up to your annual, you'll start getting the monthly enrollment reports. So we wanted to give you some context for the September enrollment report that you'll be receiving and kind of set the stage. We are constantly looking at enrollment. It impacts obviously class placement, staffing, budgets, so it's very important to us to be on top of it. Unfortunately, this year more so than ever before. It's been hard to get an accurate picture of where we are with enrollment. So we'll share with you what we know as of today. Do you want to talk about the numbers?
Our registration system's been online since March, and we have delivered and have a number of pending as of about 8 o'clock this morning, 5,100 total enrolled students K-12. In May of 2021, that number was 5,036, so we're up a little bit from where we were in May in terms of the number of registrations. In September of 2020, we were 5,264, which is just a little bit more than where we're at as of 8 o'clock this morning. But in September of 2019, before the COVID shutdown, we were at 6,242. We're seeing the impact across K-12, and we wanted to update you a little bit by level.
So, interesting about elementary, September of 2019, the last time it was a quote-unquote normal start for us. At elementary, we are down just about 600 kids. And interestingly enough, it's about 100 kids per grade level. It's also about 100 kids per school. And that's how you get your 600 kids. Before September of 2019, we averaged about 450 enrollment per building. And we also averaged about 450 per grade level. I don't know how we magically make that happen. And as of this morning, those numbers are about 350. So it's about 350 for each grade across the district. It's also about 350 for each of our elementary schools. I do want to say that on top of that, in addition to that number, we have just under 100 kids registered in GP Flex Elementary.
And unlike last year in GP Flex, elementary is actually a lower enrollment. Most of our enrollment in GP Flex is at the secondary level. Currently, we have 62 middle school students enrolled in GP Flex and 103 high school students enrolled in GP Flex. So that number comes out of our school enrollments. North is sitting at about 600 students today, south at about 500. And the high school, we've delivered 1,527, and in Power School, there's 1,800, so there's a difference there of about 286. Those are kids who were ours last year who haven't registered yet. That's the same across the district. There are still families out there who have not registered for the 21-22 school year. So to wrap this up, Susan and I just wanted to let our community know that registration is still open and available. You go online, the registration link is still out there. It does seem every year that as soon as the buses start to run, parents start to realize, wait a minute, I should have done something. So we do anticipate when we get the official enrollment in September to you, these numbers will change, but that gives you a little sense of what we're looking at today and how we're trying to make staffing decisions across the district. Any questions?
Gary, can I ask you to speak a little closer to the microphone?
Do we have any information about comparable districts elsewhere in the state?
We don't have,
On our own data.
we don't have direct numbers, but informal conversations in superintendent's meeting for Southern Oregon, that's a consistent trend across the 13 districts in Southern Oregon.
Thank you.
Those numbers again on GP Flex.
Elementary,
93 elementary GP Flex kids.
62 middle school, and 103 high school.
How many high school?
103.
103.
Pardon me, what was elementary again?
93.
Thank you.
So on a normal year, I suspect there are lots of parents who don't register their children because they don't remember. So what do we typically see in a normal time frame parents enrolling their kids. I guess I'm just trying to gauge how many do we think we're going to lose? What kind of numbers do we expect to increase here in the next 2 weeks before the kids come back to school?
So at the elementary level, we have been doing a lot of different things. Emails, Parent Square, our new communication tool, but really the office staff have been doing a wonderful job of just picking up the phone. So any family that we had last year and they haven't registered yet, they have been getting more than one phone call from office staff at the building that they were last at, you know, encouraging them to fill out the paperwork. I think the students that we had, you also mentioned losing students. These numbers, I think, are solid-ish, of students because they've taken the time to fill out the registration forms for this year. I know most parents who are going to do that, they're intending to have their students enroll. So what we're after now is trying to catch those kids who we had last year. We've not received any indication that they've moved out of the area. I'm just trying to encourage them to fill out paperwork. It is very traditional, especially for kindergarten, at some of our sites. We're not joking when we say literally they see the buses drive by, and that's their first impetus to call the school.
So you,
And as the middle and high school gets busier, as more activity starts, people start to, oh, wait a second, it's that time of year.
so you'd expect a surge in numbers between now and the bus arriving and not realizing my kid isn't on it?
We don't think we'll be at the 2019 numbers of 6,242,
Right.
but we're already trending higher than our September of last year, which is a good thing for us.
Todd, we don't want to use the word surge. It's a terrible word to use right now. Brian?
Yeah, thank you. I was just wondering if we ever employ methods like actually going and knocking on people's doors or anything like that.
The high school just conducted home visits, welcome packets for freshmen. We've done things like that before at elementary as well. With COVID protocols and stuff, that's been a little bit harder to accomplish and getting enough staff willing to do it, but we do make attempts at it.
Thanks.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you very much. Item 4.2, GHS Communications Career, Principal Chunk.
All right, this is a plan course statement to go along with our expanded elective opportunities at Gladiola High School. This is a communication and careers class for students. And one of the major areas on this is working on soft skills. Most employers say that new employees are lacking in soft skills, being able to communicate and being able to share ideas and work collaboratively in a group. So a lot of the core of this class will focus on that. They're looking at being able to communicate in a variety of professional situations, working on messages, context, how to be an active listener, working on a variety of verbal and nonverbal listening techniques. They're also going to work at different interpersonal situations, and then that'll kind of be the foundation of the course and work into what careers are available and how you use this communication in careers. The goal is then second semester, and we'll have a new plan course statement for that, for communication and careers 2, where they're working these into projects, presentations, videos with voiceover, documentaries, that kind of stuff. And so we're excited this should hopefully increase engagement, attendance, and give an additional opportunity for students to explore some potential career paths down the road as well. Anybody have any questions?
I think it's very necessary for this group of children. Thank you.
I like your sparkliness, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you.
Anybody else questions? Thank you for your service.
All right, thank you. All right, 4.3, Essential Skills Update. Director Evans.
And I would just introduce this topic. There's been expressed concern in the public out there by the recent suspension of the essential skills requirement by the state, and so I've asked Director Evans to come in and speak to our efforts to ensure every student does leave here knowing how to read, write, and do math. Go ahead.
Yep. Like Kirk said, we've been getting lots of questions. I think social media and media headlines have misrepresented, in my opinion, what the loss of essential skills is and what it is not. So I'm here to clarify what it is and is not for Grants Pass High School. Our grad requirements, I put a copy in your packet tonight. You'll see there are 3 basic areas. Credits, 24 credits are required, including in English, math, and science. There's the essential skill requirement, and then finally there's the personalized learning requirement, which includes the educational plan and profile, the career-related learning experiences, and the extended application. What Senate Bill 744 suspended, this is actually, so the last 2 years, essential skills has been suspended for the class of 20 and the class of 21. So for the next 3 years, the reading, writing, math essential skill requirement is suspended. If you turn to the second page in the packet, you'll see a list of what the essential skill assessments looked like. It's important to look at those because even though the requirement has gone away, the assessments have not gone away. We will still give the SAT, the PSAT, the Oregon State Assessment, work samples, and other assessment items listed there. We will still use the data to gauge how students are doing in those 3 areas, language arts, math, and science. And that data will help drive some educational decisions. Our grad requirements, if you look back at our grad statistics over the last number of years, essential skills came into place, I think, in 2010, 2012, something like that. And our graduation rate has improved since then. Our rigor in our English language arts and math classes maintains that integrity of the English essential skill requirements. So that's not going to be lost. Students will still be graduating with a very strong education and still will have those skills in order to graduate. Like Brian Thompson said today, you can't graduate from Grants Pass High School without those 4 credits and knowing how to read and write. You cannot graduate without those 3 credits in math and being able to do what's necessary to pass the essential skill of math. So we still will use the data. The assessments that are provided under essential skills will still be administered, and our graduation requirements will still meet a very high rigorous standard. Any questions about that?
Brian?
Yeah, thank you. I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. So the state says these are not a requirement, but as a district, it isn't a requirement, but we still test for it.
Right.
So, okay.
We still provide opportunities for the SAT, the PSAT. We are still required by Oregon law to give local performance assessments called work samples, which is also, I mean, that's where kids demonstrate their skill of reading, writing, and math. So those requirements to give those assessments didn't go away, but meeting that standard for graduation went away from Senate Bill, whatever that number was, 744.
And I'm sorry for not being up to speed on that Senate bill, but could you or Kirk or somebody provide the rationale for why they passed that? Or because I'm not totally clear on why that was passed.
Yeah, I wish I could speak to that better. My only assumption, and this would be purely an assumption, so forgive me, is that there has been a lot of lost learning over the past year and a half, and the state wanted to recognize that by eliminating this requirement for graduation. And so Tricia's presentation tonight was to ensure the board that we still have very high rigor, high standards, and numerous opportunities for students to demonstrate that through these opportunities presented in this document.
Thank you.
Gary?
So now, this will be my memory test. If I remember it, in the classes, they, have several weeks of classes, and then they attempt one of these essential skill things. And so essentially the classes are providing them the opportunities to do these essential skills throughout the semester, probably. So, and so before they had to do those, and now Senate Bill, whatever.
They still have to do those. They're still going to do those in class.
Okay.
Because writing, reading, it's a function of the language arts class. They're gonna do a lot of 5-paragraph essays. They're gonna write a lot of reports. They're gonna do a lot of math problem solving. All this law did was say for graduation, there was a certain benchmark on this list of assessments, these scores, and we had to track it. Honestly, we didn't have, over the last number of years, essential skills have been required. We have not had students not graduate because they did not meet essential skills. Students don't graduate because they don't meet the credit requirements, but they all meet the essential skill requirements. So teachers are still going to be providing opportunities for math problem solving, reading, and writing in their classrooms.
And the students are still doing essential skills, so it doesn't really sound like anything changed unless there's a possibility for them to not meet the benchmark of the essential skill, even though they've taken it in the class.
Trying to track on what you're saying. Teachers grade students, they provide feedback on how they're doing on those basic skills of reading, writing, and math, and make sure that students are meeting the standard needed to pass the class, which is a high standard.
Would it be fair to say that if they passed the class, they would have already met the essential skills?
That's what we've seen in our data over the last number of years, that essential skills have been required.
Those people in Salem are weird.
They're behind.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. All right, item 4.4, reopening schools update, safety precautions, distant learning preparedness. And our report will be by Directors Ely and Cantola.
Absolutely.
All right. Good evening, everyone. In your packet, you have a copy of the Safe Return to In-Person Instruction and Continuity of Services Plan. That is the big picture overview of the work that we've been doing to ensure that our schools are going to be a safe place for our students and staff to return to this year. It covers the mental health and educational components. It covers our communicable disease plan, and also those safety components that we have to make sure that we have in place so that it is a safe place for students and staff. And so I'm not going to go over every page of this. This is going to be posted on our website tomorrow morning with links to our communicable disease plan. So if anybody is interested in reading the narrative behind that, that will be available. I did want to go through just kind of what a day-to-day is going to look like for students, staff, and just any public coming into the building. So for staff, it's going to look a lot like it did last year when we were able to bring our students back to school. They have to do a daily check-in. It's a process that comes up on their phone every day. It's like a calendar reminder, and they have to verify basically, that they don't have any COVID symptoms or any other communicable disease symptoms. If they do, they need to call their supervisor, the principal, or if it's a support service staff, one of the supervisors, and just talk about what's going on with them. Kind of like the same that we do when we're not feeling well, same process. If they do come to school and they are displaying any symptoms, particularly of COVID-19, we can offer them the Binax Now test if they would like to do that. If they don't, they immediately go home, and they have to stay home until they are symptom-free for 10 days and they don't have a fever for 24 hours without the use of fever-reducing medication. Hand washing is required upon entry into school. Hand washing is required, obviously, before you eat or put anything in your mouth. Masks are required for all staff. We're going to continue with the cleaning of high-touch surfaces. We will probably have our custodians fog our buildings at the end of the day rather than doing that periodically through the day. That causes a bit of disruption, and there isn't really any concrete evidence that the fogging is really doing that much as if we're doing it just continually throughout the day. So we're going to do that at the end of the day. Staff will, to the extent possible, keep their students 3 feet apart, and as well as their interactions with others, to the extent they can, they will stay 3 feet apart. And talked about the cleaning already. And then we also provide periodic training to our staff. So next week when our staff come back to school, we'll go through the same training process that we did last year when staff are coming back to school. And it's basically going through good hand hygiene, the symptoms of COVID, all of those things that are related to COVID or communicable disease management. With our students, there will be screening upon entry into school. So as the students come in, there will be staff members there to greet them. If students look like they are not feeling well, the student will be pulled aside and their parents will be called. When their parents arrive at the school, if they would like us to do the Binax Now test for their student, we can do that, but that is totally up to the parent. Hand washing for the students upon entry to the school. Students also will be required to wear a mask while they are in the school building and in their classroom. They obviously don't have to wear a mask while they're eating lunch, while they're at recess, and if they're participating in any sporting activities. They will not have to be required to wear the mask. They will also receive ongoing instruction on health hygiene, which includes hand washing, covering your cough and sneeze, lunchroom etiquette, don't share your food with your buddy, and staying home when they're sick. In our transportation department, the drivers and students will all be required to wear masks while they're on the bus. We'll have our rider lists updated daily so that if we do have to do any contact tracing, we have those rider lists and we'll be able to check back to see, you know, if a student does test positive, we'll know which other children that they were in contact with. Also in the classroom roster will be the contact tracing log for if a student like in a classroom tests positive. So we'll have multiple ways that we can do contact tracing. Also on the buses, we'll keep the windows open to the extent possible because we know that good airflow is important. And the buses will be wiped down between routes and they'll be fogged at the end of the day also. The other thing that we're doing just as a district-wide measure, the school board has invested a significant amount of money to upgrade our HVAC systems at all of our schools. So you guys know about that. We are installing HVAC systems at Allendale, Highland, Riverside, North, and South Middle School. Those are 5 old schools who up until this year operated on boiler systems and did not have any system in place to allow for a good air exchange. So we're excited about that. That's been a big project this summer. So if we do have positive cases in the district, we do contact tracing immediately. Quarantine will be determined based on the OHA's latest definition of close contact. So it's a couple of things. If you're within 6 feet of someone for 15 cumulative minutes in the day, and so that means I could be with Danny for 2 minutes now, and then I'm going to be with him 2 minutes again later in the day, and then over the course of the day, it has to add up to 15 minutes of cumulative interaction. And then there is an exception that OHA has put in this year. If students are within 3 to 6 feet of one another, but they have been appropriately wearing their masks and the teacher can testify that they have, then the students will not have to be quarantined if they come in close contact with a positive COVID case. And students who are fully vaccinated will not have to quarantine, and that is the same for staff. If staff are fully vaccinated, they do not have to quarantine either. Parents will be notified immediately if there is a close contact, and staff are also notified immediately. And then the district coordinates with the local health authority on all issues related to COVID and the protocols that we follow. Do you guys have any questions about that part?
Brian?
Thank you, Sherry. I have a few questions. The first one, I didn't write an appropriate note here, but you just said something about if there's certain scenarios where staff will not have to quarantine. Could you explain that again?
If they're vaccinated, they don't
Okay.
have to quarantine. That's the only situation that staff would not have to quarantine. The exception is only for students, where if they're within 3 to 6 feet of one another, but they're appropriately masked, the students would not have to quarantine. That exception does not apply to staff.
Okay, so for students.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And then I was looking for a little clarification on, you mentioned when students are doing sports or PE, they do not need to be masked, correct?
Right. When they're physically engaged in an activity, they do not have to have their masks on.
Is that indoor or outdoor?
There's a new rule that came out today on the indoor, and so I'm going to have to look at that again, Brian, because I didn't have a chance to read that. I do know that outside, if the kids are actively engaged, they don't have to wear the mask. If they're on the sidelines, just waiting like to go in, they have to have a mask on. And anybody who is a spectator at the event has to have a mask on.
Okay. Yeah, maybe later you could clarify the indoor piece.
I'll look it up. After
Okay.
we're done here, I'll look it up and I'll let you know.
Okay, and then the last one was regarding lunch.
Mhm.
I heard from one parent who was concerned about students essentially cramming into the cafeteria and all having their masks off and eating. So how are we addressing that?
So we are putting into place a lot of alternative eating areas for our students. And so we purchased some of the canopy, kind of like wedding tent structures. So we're going to have multiple areas for the students to eat, so they won't all be in the cafeteria like they usually are. And we're doing that at all of our schools, not just one or the other, but that's consistent around the district. And because it does get cold and wet here in the winter, we're also purchasing like propane heaters that we'll have available so that the kids aren't sitting outside freezing while they're eating.
Okay, will that be like the student's choice whether they want to eat inside or outside, or will there be like a rotation, or how will that work?
I don't know how they're going to work that out at the schools. I'm sure they'll let the kids have a choice, but whoever's monitoring is going to have to make sure that they're not letting the indoor area get overcrowded. And so they'll have to work out a method to do that. And I don't know if Susan has talked about that for elementary, or Trish with the secondary, about how they're going to decide who gets to be inside or outside.
Okay, well, as long as it's, it's on their radar, that's good enough for me.
Yep.
Is one of those options or alternatives to eat in the classroom as well?
Not at this point, no.
Okay.
The teachers are allowed to have a lunch break too, and so it's hard to have kids in the classroom eating and then allow the teacher that time so that they can have their break as well.
Any further questions from our board? Danny, do you have anything? You can't just stand there quietly the whole time.
Oh, man, I do that well, though. So I have the easy part. Unfortunately, we are well too practiced in that thing called CDL, or comprehensive distant learning. So what happens if, by chance, we have to go to a CDL situation? And actually, we have one where I think you guys are aware that we're going to have to go to a CDL situation with South, not because of COVID, but because the building's not ready to be occupied probably until the end of September. So schedules, the schedules at the secondary, Trish is working with the principals. We anticipate that they will look almost like the schedules are in a regular school day. We're not going to have special schedules like we did last year for CDL, we hope, because we want the kids to CDL things to be smaller amounts of time, and then they'd return and continue with the regular schedule. That may not be the same with elementary. I think Susan's looking at some adjustments to elementary so that all the elementary schedules are the same. Hard for parents if I have a first grader, a fourth grader, and a third grader or whatever, and they're all on different schedules of when I do this and that and the other things. So the idea with that would be to have the schedules all be similar. Chromebooks, we're in great shape. We let most of our students that had Chromebooks last year at the secondary level just keep them. And so, and then they'll bring them back and forth to school. We have enough at the elementary grades that if the school has to go to CDL, there's enough in their classrooms that they can check Chromebooks out at the classroom level. So again, I told you, we're too good at this. Meals, Michael Morris and his staff are amazing. They can turn on a dime and they can start processing meals to be picked up or delivered on the buses. So teachers, a little more difficult because you've got the curriculum differences between teaching online and teaching in person. But we have that thing called Canvas, and Canvas is more than just a online learning tool. It is a tool, it's our learning management system. It's where we're supposed to be storing lessons, students can review things and that kind of stuff. And so the goal there is that we will continue to have teachers do Canvas whether we're in CDL or not, so that they're used to that. Kids can access it when they're absent, those types of things. I think the beginning hope is that they'll have 2 days of CDL prepared, just kind of can things in case we have to turn and burn quickly. So unfortunately, we're good at the CDL stuff, and so we believe we can transition quickly to that. And yeah, Cassie.
So students that are quarantining, are they going to utilize Canvas? Or, I mean, yeah?
Yes. Yeah, and I think that's actually in the RSSLs, that you have to have a
Yeah.
CDL for students that are quarantined.
Okay.
So good question.
One more question. If a student, if there is a positive COVID case, what's the threshold? Where does it kick it into the realm of a group, cohort, class, school, as soon as there's one COVID case versus how many? I don't understand those numbers.
I think it all comes down, and I'll let Sherry correct everything I say that's wrong here, but I believe it comes down to that contact tracing. So if there's that 6 feet distance thing for 15-minute period of time, depends on how many students are technically found to have been exposed. So if it's one student, then the infected student and the student that was exposed have to quarantine. If they discover that a whole class was within that threshold, then that whole class would have to quarantine for that period of time. Again, unless the masks were being worn by the students and that kind of stuff. So Anthony is our new safety officer, and so he would be responsible for working with OHA to track what the exposure level was and make a determination from there.
So case by case, using a matrix of sorts, not necessarily one kicks out all, so to speak.
Correct.
Okay.
So for instance, Todd, last year we had some single students, we had some groups of students. I think at one time, just before a break, Riverside had so many classrooms where they were quarantining that the whole school shut down for the 2 days before the break. So case by case basis.
Thank you.
Brian?
So I understand that we're starting school a week later than we were originally planning to. And so I actually think this question might be more for Scott or Kirk, but I've had parents express to me concern about opening schools, and I know that we have excellent safety practices in place, and I know that staff can handle this. But I guess, Scott, from your perspective, do you see any sort of scenario where everyone's going back to distance learning during this spike or surge?
Do I see a scenario where that can happen? Yes, I think there are many scenarios that can play out over the course of the next several weeks. I think that the opportunity to do this well and bring our children back exists. I do think that there will likely be some hiccups along the way. I don't think that this will go smoothly, but I don't think that I don't believe that it shouldn't be done, and I don't believe it can't be done, but I would be ignorant if I said it's just going to go great and we're not going to have any problems. I think that is just not the reality of the situation that we're facing. So there is an element of risk to what we're doing. I think we are, as I have heard tonight, trying to be as safe and protective of everyone as we can be. I think if parents are overly concerned, they have the opportunity to enroll their children in GP Flex and go strictly online until they feel more comfortable. So I think that the opportunity for people to approach this based on how they feel they should and what is right for them and their children is out there for everyone to choose. And I think that I feel very confident in the plan that's been presented tonight, but to say that, yeah, there's not going to be some hiccups, I think is not true. I think there will be. And certainly there is a scenario where everything can get shut down. I think that that's unlikely. But yeah, there are scenarios that can all play out in that. So I can speak later when we get to board reports and special concerns about where we stand as a county, as the hospital. But I will save that for later. But those are my thoughts on reopening. I think parents can do that safely and how they choose. And I think that's probably the best plan that we can come up with. There are lots of options.
Okay, thank you for that input. And then just one other quick question. Every meeting I go to, there's someone that is not doing great with their mask. And so I can see that playing out sporadically, at different sites. So what is the mechanism for a student or a staff member to remedy that kind of situation?
You gonna go?
Well, how about staff? How's that? And so staff, the principals are assigned to monitor their schools. And so if staff are not doing masks appropriately and they see it or they hear about it or they're told about it, they're supposed to do an investigation like they would anything else. And then they educate the person on the proper mask attire is over the nose, over the mouth, and all that kind of thing. And then we document that we've had that education, and then it could go on to discipline, progressive discipline, if that happens. We did have cases last year where we had to, do some of the educating and that kind of stuff, but it never got to the progressive discipline level. With students, they have asked us not to do discipline for the most part. It's to be educating and educating and educating and educating. Ultimately, if somebody just says, I'm just not going to wear a mask, then the alternative would be that they would need to do the GP Flex online type of situation. So, and trust me, Brian, there are people that will tell administrators immediately if there are staff or students not wearing their masks appropriately.
We also have like an anonymous reporting tool. So people, if they are afraid to let somebody know that they're, telling on them essentially, they can go to that anonymous reporting tool. And that comes to me, and then I follow up with whichever school it is where that report has come in. And then we follow whichever protocol that Danny mentioned, whether it's staff or student. We do make accommodations for both staff and students if they have an ADA situation where they can't wear the mask. We do make the accommodation that they can wear the face shield instead. If they can't wear the face shield, then we work with the family on one of the other alternatives, for distance learning, comprehensive distance learning or something like that.
Great, thank you.
Sherry, is that required by the state?
The accommodation,
No, the anonymous tool.
I don't know that it's required by the state. It's something that we've implemented for all kinds of safety issues. And so we get reports on, a variety of things that people see and are concerned about. There is a state, through the Oregon State Police, there is, I think it's more endorsed by the state, but it's more for like bullying and violent acts. And so that's kind of a separate thing, but that's the one that's endorsed by the state.
Okay. Thank you.
So Sunday, I was asked by someone if masks were going to be required, and I said yes. And they said they didn't know, or where could they get confirmation for that? You said it was going to be on the website. Will there also be a communication from Kristen to all of the parents and interested parties?
We've already done that.
Yeah,
You've already done that.
they have done it, but if it's not getting out, we'll make a note and make sure that it's out again.
Thank you.
Don?
Is there potential for an unmasked student who has either a medical or religious excuse to be present? And if so, how is that person protected, since no one would know that initially?
To my knowledge, there isn't a scenario that would allow a student to be at school completely unmasked. And so if they had a condition such that they could not wear a mask all day, we would have to work with them on some kind of distance learning.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. I would just, if I may, throw in my 2 cents on masking. I know that this is a very contentious issue. As a surgeon, I have worn a mask for decades now, and one of the reasons why we wear a mask is not to protect me from the patient, it is to protect the patient from me. And really, as we wear a mask, it is not to protect ourselves from other people, it is to protect other people from us. And that is really the purpose of masking. And I think if we can view it in that light, that we are wearing a mask to protect other people from us, not necessarily protecting us from them, it becomes more of a sign of respect that we are doing this to help other people. And that's one of the reasons why we wear a mask in the operating room. The whole purpose of the mask is to decrease the amount of respiratory infection that could be admitted from an individual, and by doing so, we protect other people around us. And I think that we need to speak more cohesively and really educatedly about the purpose of masking. That is the intent of the mask. I hear questions every day from members of the community and from my patients even about if the mask doesn't protect us, if the COVID can still get through the mask, then what's the point? And the point is just that we are decreasing what we admit and protecting other people by masking. And that is the entire purpose of what we're asking the students to do, is to decrease the transmission that they may be spreading to help protect one another and to protect the whole. And so I think as we move forward, I would just ask each of you to remember that that is the purpose of masking. It is not for us to be protected from other people. It is really us protecting them from us. That's why we wear
protective equipment, sir.
That is why in the operating room we wear masks, is to protect our patients from us and not necessarily us from them. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there as we continue on with our meeting tonight, knowing that we'll have many comments about masking, but I just wanted to remind the board that is the intended purpose of why we are doing what we're doing. So, any further questions? Okay, thank you. We do have a number of people who wish to speak to these items, and we will invite you up as I receive the cards. And so our first person is Judy Ahrens.
It appears that Judy is left.
Okay. Roy Lindsay.
Just a reminder to the public that we are limited to 3 minutes, and I will provide a 30-second warning before the end of your 3 minutes.
My timing is 3 minutes. My name is Roy Lindsay, and I live in Grants Pass. I'm here to urge you to not mandate masks and jabbing of students and faculty. I have very specific reasons and information which I intend to share today. Masks are not effective. They are hazardous to the physical and mental health of children, and they do no good for adults. Using a mask is like trying to strain out gnats using a chain link fence. In an article published August 2008 by the NIH, declared that, quote, bacterial pneumonia caused most deaths in the 1918 influenza pandemic, unquote, and was the result of masks. We are all aware of the word woke. It is an insidious, mesmerizing paradigm that is harmful. Wokeism leads to the one-way door to socialism, which leads to the steep downward slope leading for communism. The badge of submission for wokeism is the mask. We are not slaves, and according to the Constitution, are free. Do not make slaves of our children. The Chinese virus vaccine is not a vaccine. It is a bioweapon designed to reduce the population of the world. The vaccine is an experimental mRNA drug that is literally killing hundreds of thousands of people worldwide. Many reputable doctors and virologists, epidemiologists are imploring people not to get jabbed. Renowned doctors such as Dr. Judy Mikovits, Dr. Peter McCullough, more than 40 peer-reviewed articles on COVID-19, Dr. Luc Montagnier, Nobel winner, Dr. Vladimir Zelenko, Dr. Robert Malone, Dr. Michael Yeadon are telling us not to get vaccinated. Even the inventor of the mRNA technology says that it is very dangerous and not for human use. Do not listen to the lamestream media, as they are propaganda outlets and are not telling us the truth. Do the right thing. Stand up for citizens of this community, the taxpayers who pay for the school district employees. Respect the rights of parents. Do not become dictators who kill people by these draconian mandates. If someone wants to get jabbed, let them commit suicide.
You have 30 seconds, Ron.
Your job is to protect the citizens and children. Do your job, please.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Heidi Napier.
Hello, everybody. I am a retired veterinarian, so I have probably spent more hours in surgery than you have. And I can tell you, these masks, these surgical masks, are designed to protect a sterile surgical field from the droplets from our nose and mouth as we breathe and as we speak. Because, you know, we all have bacteria in our nose and in our mouth, and we breathe it out continually. And when you're doing surgery, you want the field to remain absolutely sterile, so you don't end up with an infected patient. Okay, so a lot of my experience was in doing shelter medicine, working in shelters, and that is preventing spread of airborne diseases, because dogs and cats suffer a lot of the same types of diseases that we do. And by the way, when I was in veterinary school, I studied the same virology that you did, Dr. Nelson, the same immunology, the same epidemiology, and actually a lot of what I learned was based on human studies, because there just hasn't been as much money spent on dogs and cats to study their diseases. So I can tell you, one of the things that it takes to prevent the spread of an airborne disease is if you have an infected animal or human who has got an airborne virus, you need to put that animal or human in a room with a separate ventilation system. Separate. That's what they do in isolation wards. You can't do that in a school. You can't do that in this room. We're all breathing out bacteria and viruses all the time. The breathing out is one of the wonderful ways that our bodies have of getting rid of things that it doesn't want. You know, we have this wonderful system in our lungs and in our windpipes and in our noses to bring things up and get rid of it, breathe it out, cough it out, whatever.
You have 30 seconds.
So anyway, okay, these are useless for children. You can breathe around them, the air goes around it, and all the viruses go with it. The other thing is that the infection fatality rate for children under 18 is 0.002%, which means about 2 out of 100,000 children who are infected with COVID.
Heidi, your time has
it.
expired.
Okay.
Thank you, Heidi. Next, we have Indra Nichols. Indra.
Thank you, and I appreciate the presentations on the safety of the school. We all care about our kids. However, you know, all my life I have trusted doctors, hospitals, the government organizations, FDA, CDC, trusted them completely to care about and treat and do its best for us, me, and my children. I have lost that confidence, and no offense, but I have really lost confidence in the school system, in many great people in education. I'm not saying everyone, but from teachers to custodians and bus drivers to administration and to school board.
You say we care about kids. Yes, I believe you care about kids, but you don't care about my kid as much as I care about my kid and love my kid. You are not at home taking care of my kid. You're not taking my kid to the park. You're not doing that. And so I've seen some really bad decisions. And when you sit up there and say, we want what's safe for kids, you're not talking about my kids. I don't know whose kids that you're talking about. First, I agree with everything about the masks. They are harmful to kids. Look, we look like a bunch of clowns in here, honestly, sitting there. We know they don't work. At the beginning, the CDC said they don't work until someone decided they do work. We want them to work so people can wear them. It is so dehumanizing. Look what we're doing to our kids. You can't even tell expressions on people. If they're smiling, are they happy? Are they not? It is so dehumanizing and so harmful. When I put on the mask, I'm perfectly healthy. I've had no mental health issues my entire life. It's depressing. It causes anxiety in me. When you take it off, you're like breathing fresh air because you can finally breathe. We're forcing our children to breathe in harmful bacteria. What was the study? They sent it to the lab of the kids wearing the masks all day. Tuberculosis, staph, pneumonia, all in that mask. It's child abuse, in my opinion. I want to pivot. The other thing I want to talk about.
You have 30 seconds.
Thank you. Is looking at the safe schools. This is like a bad social experiment for our kids. This is a school for academics. This is to learn, and I was really glad to hear that we're still going to test and have some proficiency. I send my children here to learn math, reading, writing, so when they go out in the world, whether it's work or college, they can do things. This is horrific. Mental health, you're gonna do mental health, emphasize the whole child.
Your time has expired.
Rather than academics. I really hope you look at this. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Mike Pelfrey.
Hello, school board members and superintendent. Take a look at that display right there. You know what that is? That's Delta Airlines. There might be a kid in the middle, might be a kid on the end. And the reason I'm pointing this out is I'm looking at the silliness of this particular display. Do you see all of us being social distance, but I noticed that you're not social distance whatsoever. Interesting. More importantly, when you sit on a plane like that, it's amazing that this disease, think about this, is so deadly. But when they drop a pack of peanuts in your lap, bam, this shit comes off. Excuse my French, I'm sorry, but I get so mad when I think about these masks. I went to the city council meeting last Wednesday, and I listened to several doctors put a doom and gloom story together. And then they came outside, and one of the school board members approached the doctors and actually wanted them to come here to do the same thing. When I heard that and when I witnessed that, I immediately jumped in action. I don't have any kids in this school. My kids are in South Carolina. But I am a taxpayer, and these kids are our future. Do you know what the psychological damage is being done to children wearing this mask? It's far greater than the COVID. Kids cannot even be kids. I am so thankful to this day that I got to grow up and be a normal kid. Do you remember how exciting it was when you got to go to school, the first day of school? I guarantee you the kids outside this door don't feel that coming up this year. The other thing that I would like to see from the school board as well as the superintendent, because I heard a doctor at the city council meeting literally state that he wanted to see kids be vaccinated. He didn't even say age. He said, I want to see kids vaccinated and masked and social distance when they go back to school. So I would love to see the school board actually go on record and let the citizens of Grants Pass know, how do you feel? Whether you think our children should be vaccinated with something that we have no idea, because it hasn't been around that long.
You have 30 seconds.
The other question I would like to ask is, I'm still waiting to find out, and you might know this, you're a doctor, can someone please tell me where the flu and the cold went? Because for some reason, it disappeared. So, you know, your job is to make sure these kids get the best education possible. They're not going to do that with this. Every time they walk into a door, somebody's checking their temperature. What
Mr.
in the
Pelfrey, your
crap
time has
is that
expired.
about? That is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. Let these kids be kids. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. All right, we'll move on our agenda. 5.0, board reports and special concerns. I'm happy to speak about the current state of the COVID infections in our community. Over the last several weeks, we've had a significant increase in the number of individuals who are testing positive in our community. 2 weeks ago, we had 700, just over 700, 730, I believe, that tested positive. And this last week, we hit 894. So our numbers continue to climb in our county. The line to be tested at the Asante facility and throughout our other communities continues to be astronomically long. Currently in our hospital, we have 76 individuals who have who are diagnosed with COVID. Our entire hospital, as has already been previously mentioned, is shut down for all operations or procedures because of the inability to do anything else other than take care of those individuals in our community who are suffering from the disease. Currently, we have 181 individuals admitted at all 4 hospitals. I just received the projections from OHSU. They are anticipating that those numbers will continue to rise until early to mid-September, with an anticipated increase of over 250 people admitted to our hospitals with COVID. Last week in our county, Josephine County, we had 14 people pass away of COVID, and that number is anticipated to continue to increase over the next several weeks. This continues to be a very dire situation for what we are seeing. The Delta variant, again, is alive and well, and it continues to afflict many of our individuals. The average age of people was calculated last week to be at 60 years of age, which means that we do have people ranging from their 20s and 30s all the way up to 80s and 90s. However, it is younger patients who we are seeing in our hospitals currently. Children are being diagnosed with COVID. Thankfully, they are not requiring hospitalizations at the same rate. It is a much lower rate, but across the nation, we are seeing more children become infected and require hospitalizations. So again, I spoke 2 weeks ago about this issue. I'm happy to continue to speak about it. I spoke to the city council as well as our county commissioners. I have given numerous interviews in trying to educate our public that what we are seeing in our community today is alive and well, and we do need to continue to be very cautious as we move forward. So those are the numbers as we see them today in our community. So this is not something that's happening in a faraway place. This is what we are seeing here. So I would encourage everyone to continue to be safe, to wear a mask when they're out in public, indoors, and to remain socially distanced. And if so inclined, I strongly recommend getting the vaccination. So that is my board report and special concern. Do we have any others, Brian?
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to bring up the prospect of reinstating the facilities committee. I know we had the facilities committee last year and into early this year, I believe, and member Durbin is no longer on the board, and so we suspended it for a time. And so I just wanted to bring up the prospect of having that committee formed and having regular meetings again.
By facilities, do you mean property?
I think property would be included in facilities.
Well, there was a facilities committee that was in action that was different from the property committee is why I ask.
I believe the most current one was property committee. Wasn't it?
Shall we call it facilities/property committee?
That may make some people happier, it sounds like. So it was you and Cassie and Casey, if I remember correctly, so we would need a third member, a volunteer to serve on that with you. I don't see a lot of hands being raised high in the air. Okay. Gary, thank you for volunteering.
Thanks, Gary.
Gary.
So, I'll probably go off on one of my whatevers. Nobody will understand me, but I'll try. The whole issue with, not the whole issue, the issue with masks and COVID in the community and people on both sides of the issue is that there's actually truth to what both sides are saying related to the various stuff we're trying to do. And it's very much like in economics, there's the unintended consequences of an economic action or a budget type item, because there's what it's called is there's the known benefits and then the unknown benefits for how things play out. So when you have a budget, you have an item, you want to cut that item, there's a constituency built in that they have very visible benefits related to that thing. But the money that gets freed up, it's less certain. The benefits aren't visible. They're harder to quantify. And so you have a very vocal set of people for the benefits are being cut, but there's no equivalent constituency for the benefits that will be achieved when the money is spent in a different way. Related to how that relates back to the COVID issue is that we have very specific things that we can see, like the hospitalization rates and the deaths that we have here in the county. And we're very focused on trying to do something about that. The other benefits that are somewhat alluded to by some of the speakers here have to do with some of the, like the wearing of masks and things like that. Those also have an effect, but it's much harder to quantify. And how do you balance those two things? One is very visible, the other is much less visible. So it's much more difficult to try to determine how to balance that. Unfortunately, as an elected body, it falls to us to make those kind of choices for the community. So at this juncture, mostly I can empathize with all the positions that I'm hearing. Maybe not all. There's some of them that I don't think are actually rooted in reality. But the idea that a mask lets the virus go in and out, that's a truth. It's so small, that's a fact. But the ability of the mask to keep the sterile surgical field, free from the medical workers' stuff that's not just the virus. That's a truth also, and it does work. So I struggle with trying to figure out how effective it is. When I look at the numbers for children, I forget what, there's various numbers on the per 100,000, but we have 6,000-ish students here. We are going to have anywhere from 0 to 2 students who may get hospitalized. And actually, I think we've already had one that had to go up to Portland that I'm aware of.
I know of 3 in our community so
Okay,
far.
3. So this is going to be a very small number. Is that number equivalent to the loss of learning and the socialization aspects of having the students be wearing masks for a couple of years? That's really tough. I don't know how to weigh that, but that's where we find ourselves. So at the current time, with the infection rate here in Josephine County, I'm good with erring on the side of, I think of it as you put it, Scott, something like military service. You don't go in the military for yourself. Nobody does that. The bad things can happen to you there. You go in there to serve. Realistically, for most of the people, wearing the mask, as you put it, Scott, is really about service to somebody else. So we do want to be known for our service to our community. And so until this latest...
I'll let you say surge. It's okay to say
Yeah,
surge.
you said no.
I know.
But
I'm taking that back for you, Gary.
till the latest event is calmed down somewhat, I mean, I'm okay with teaching the students that, you know, this is part of your service to your community and doing that. So, anyway, just
I
thought I'd
appreciate
put
that,
that out
Gary.
there.
And I would echo your sentiment. It really is, it is something that we're doing to protect the community. We are seeing that the children are becoming infected, and I think the other thought is that they can take this home to their unvaccinated parents or grandparents or whoever, and so it is a service that we are doing to protect one another. It is not, if we talk about it differently, I think it is easier to accept. I am the first one to take my mask off when I can. I agree, it is not fun to wear a mask all the time, but it is something that we do out of respect and service for our community, and I appreciate you so eloquently describing that. So, Todd?
And I probably won't be able to articulate as well as Gary, but along those same lines, I feel that we are concentrating on the physical aspects and not the mental breakdown of wearing masks that has implications here. And I hope that we can try to find a better balance. I don't feel like personally that we have found that balance right now because of the mental state of being that's our children and ourselves are suffering based on the contention and what we're witnessing here and feeling here. It is hard to quantify the mental breakdown of what's happening. It's easy to quantify the physical breakdown. So I would hope that we could concentrate more on the mental to catch up to the physical impacts that mask wearing is having on us all.
I would just say it's really disappointing that essentially we didn't have COVID here last year. We could have not done all those things. But unfortunately, Salem's kind of a one-size-fits-all for the state. And if they'd give us more flexibility, people wouldn't be so adamant about the mask right now if we hadn't done them when there was essentially zero COVID in Josephine County most of last year.
And I agree, if we had more control, and the 0 to 2 children or 3 children physically hurting right now compared to much more than 3 mentally hurting is my concern.
Okay, any other board reports or special concerns before we move on to our action items?
I'd like to let the record show that under board concerns that I have asked for an agenda item, for lack of a better title. I would call it the post-termination hearings. I'd like to discuss that possibility with the rest of the board in a board setting and in the near future. And I've already approached the superintendent and the chairman of the board, and they've been gracious enough to grant that. I believe that's how I interpret it, but it will have to take place. We have to fit it in at some place, but that's something I'll be watching, is for the opportunity to have that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Cliff.
Well, so Scott, I'd heard some, I guess I'd say rumblings about that, and my take on, after the advice that we received from the attorneys and reading our policy KLAR, which is our public complaint procedure, that there should have been a appeal to the board available to the 2 educators. And so is what Cliff's referring to, is that something you're going to put on the agenda next meeting?
Cliff did not specify any agenda or any policy other than he wished to discuss this item with the board, so.
It doesn't matter the date to me. I want all 7 board members available to meet together.
Well, actually, there's no reason we can't discuss it right now.
It hasn't been published on the agenda.
I would suggest we put it on the agenda, and that would be a way to keep us all together and discuss it formally, which it needs to be known publicly for that purpose.
So yes, Cliff did send me an email. We are gathering information. No specific policy was cited in the emails that I received. So as of right now, we will simply address it as Cliff's desire to speak on that item. So, okay, any other board reports or special concerns? Brian?
Yeah, just to follow up with what Gary said, if our policy states that there should be a appeal, shouldn't that be put on the agenda as well?
Well, again, I'm just going by what I was informed of previously. So if someone would like to make or send an email or ask for something to be on the agenda, we can certainly look at that. So all I have is what Cliff sent me before, which is he wished to speak to a certain item, the pre-termination event. That was all he had asked for.
What was the conclusion? That there was a discussion about a post-termination hearing? And having that as an option? Was there not?
Well, I think we just decided that's going to be put on a future agenda.
I'm trying to.
Okay. Anything else? Then moving on, we will go to 6.0, or action items. 6.1, approval of second and final readings of board policies and ARs. I think we'll take these each one by one, not knowing how much discussion will be on all of them. So we'll take 6.1.1, IFE, curriculum guides and course outlines. I will entertain a motion to approve.
Member DeLagrange moves to approve 6.1.1 IFE curriculum guides and course outlines.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second?
Thank you. Any discussion?
I just had one spot under curriculum guides, the new paragraph. It says outlines will be written for all courses offered in the district. And then later it says teachers are expected to adhere. Could we change that to a will adhere closely? Just to match the top of the paragraph?
Kirk is nodding yes, so.
Yeah?
Yes,
couldn't
that would
hear
be
you.
perfect, if that's the will of the board, so be it for policy. That's your department.
The will.
Amend the motion.
Yeah. So I'd like to amend the motion to add on the third line, to omit expected and to add will.
Okay, so we have an amended motion. Second?
I second the amendment.
Any further discussion?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that louder into the microphone?
So the policy as read states curriculum guides and course outlines will be written for all courses offered in the district. Academic content standards and essential skills as adopted by the State Board of Education will be included. Teachers are expected, I'm asking to change it to will, just to match the top. So teachers will adhere closely to the course of study adopted by the district, not that they are expected to adhere.
And what was your response to Superintendent Cole?
If it's the will of the board, there's nothing illegal about this, and this is the board's policy, so the board language it's being suggested to amend the current proposed language. There is nothing standing in the way of the board to adopt it as Cassie has stated.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the amended motion, please say yes.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. 6.1.2 IGBG, homebound instruction. Can we entertain a motion to approve that action item?
So moved. Member Wilkins.
Member DeLagrange, second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor of passing 6.1.2, please say yes.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. 6.1.3 IGDA, student organizations. We have a motion to approve that.
I would move that we postpone 6.1.3 IGDA student organizations to the next board meeting. We received some communication on that. I read through it quickly, looked like there was some reasonable things in there, and I am not prepared to try and amend this thing on the fly. So I move that we postpone this to the next meeting. Sorry.
Member Wilkins, seconds. I have it all.
Is there any reason why we couldn't talk about and make changes to the policy at this point in time?
No?
We just did it on the first motion or action item, so.
I assume that you all received the communication about student organizations?
I briefly did, and I'm forgetting what I read briefly.
So
I need to see it if I'm going to discuss it.
So that's why I'm saying we should postpone it to the next meeting. Anyway, briefly in there, there was a suggestion to make sure the parents are notified and appropriately related to student organizations, and I thought that was a good idea.
Okay.
And prior to that communication, I have a couple of lines that I'm not liking. So, I mean, you want to talk about them now, or are we deciding to wait until Todd's caught up?
Well, we have a motion on the floor to postpone if it,
And I
so
second
that's
it.
where and it's been seconded, so.
But it would be good for everybody to hear what you're thinking about so that we can get it done next time.
All right. First paragraph, the last line says the district may also support student organizations which are not directly curriculum related. That seems, I want to rework that. And then the last paragraph I don't like either, but I don't. I don't have a specific, I think I don't like the whole thing. It needs to be less. Maybe assignment.
Well, we'll have to give direction to the district office that what we want to see for the next time, so.
Mhm.
What would you like to do to that paragraph?
Hold on, I'm figuring it out.
Since the motion is to move it later,
Yeah.
and we have, I believe, 3 weeks between this board meeting and the next one, there's ample time for individual board members to meet with myself and the board secretary to express concerns and suggested language to bring back to the board at the next meeting.
Thank you, Kirk.
Okay?
Okay, so we have a motion, it's been seconded. Unless we have any further discussion, all in favor of placing this on hold until our next board meeting, please say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
I'd like to comment on these hot mics tonight.
6.1.4, CBA, qualifications and duties of the superintendent.
Before the board takes any action on this one, Member Richardson, I believe, inquired as to whether or not this was a required policy. And after contacting OSBA, it's a highly recommended policy, not a required policy.
All right, well, I will entertain a motion to approve the policy as written.
We need a motion before we discuss.
Member DeLaGrange moves to approve 6.1.4 CBA, qualifications and duties of the superintendent.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second?
Thank you. Discussion?
So my point remains, having things in two places, the superintendent's contract is, I don't remember that there is language in here that essentially says that if it's in the superintendent's contract different, which one is the one that is the one we go by type of thing. So I'm still thinking that there's way too much in here given what the current superintendent's contract looks like. So I would recommend that we not have all of this detail in there, and that possibly we would just have some paragraph that points to the contract.
Well, we actually haven't passed a contract, so
No, there's a contract in force.
from, I believe it was 2002 was the last time it was revised.
Yeah.
So,
Pardon me, what did you just say?
said we have not passed a new contract, so he is currently operating under the contract that was originally written in 2002. I believe that's when it was last written.
Well, you know, I've heard that figure bandied about but it hasn't been looked at for 20 years. And I know the previous superintendent went over it very closely 10 years ago and was still in force when he left, and it was reviewed, the year before he left. And so I don't think that just because it wasn't reviewed by an outside lawyer since 2002 doesn't mean it wasn't reviewed by a lawyer. Because the previous superintendent was a lawyer and very versed in administrative policy.
So I would like to help provide some clarification. So it's the policy that it has not been revised since, it says on the page, 2004. This policy has not been revisited since 2004. During that time, the structure of the superintendent's contract has changed multiple times. And that contract is between the board and the superintendent. And so I think what I hear Member Richardson saying is the contract stipulates the duties and responsibilities of what the superintendent is to fulfill. And that's, obviously that's a contract between the board and the superintendent. And this policy is not a required policy, so the board can accomplish the same work in a contract with the superintendent. Is that fairly representing what you're stating, Member Richardson?
Yes.
So I guess my question is it easier to revise a policy if we felt that that needed to be revised, or the superintendent contract? And given the difficulties we've had thus far, I would think it would be easier to revise the policy than the contract. And so instead of revising the contract to fit the policy, we could simply refer the contract back to the policy that we have put into place, and then future boards could alter or change that policy without having to revise the entire contract, which is an expensive process to obtain legal advice and rewrite things. So it would probably be better to move forward with a policy as opposed to trying to rewrite the contract every time something changed in the policy.
I agree.
Yeah, that's essentially the same thing in reverse. So the contract language would be less detailed and would essentially point to the policy, which is acceptable also.
So from just an ease of use, from a board's perspective, I think that would be the better option for us, as opposed to trying to make the contract fit something and not having a nice policy, and just have a nice policy and refer in the contract back to the policy as far as the superintendent responsibilities. So we do have a motion to approve this. Any further discussion? All right, Tanya, would you give us a roll call vote on this one, please?
Board Chair Nelson,
Yes?
Member Coleman,
I think I would like to abstain, if I may.
Member Wilkins,
Yes.
Member Neville,
Repeat, this is to
approve the policy.
Approve the policy as is.
Qualifications and duties of the superintendent.
yes.
Member Brownell,
Yes.
Member De La Grange,
Yes.
Member Richardson.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. 6.1.5 JGA, corporal punishment. We have a motion to approve this policy.
I have a question. In the highlighted area near the bottom, it talks about if a staff member is found in violation of this policy, they may be subject to discipline up to and including dismissal. I don't have any issue there. But then after that, it says a volunteer found in violation of this policy by administration may be subject to sanctions and/or prohibited from volunteer service in the district. So I'm looking for clarity on subject to sanctions, what that would mean. And also, does this policy not explicitly saying anything about, any sort of law being broken if they could be subject to any sort of criminal offenses?
Yeah, there are other policies with respect to volunteers that would include referral to law enforcement should there be any legal violations. As such, sanctions could range from suspended from volunteering for a period of time to permanently not working in our schools, or limiting the capacity in which one could volunteer. So that varies and would be at the discretion of administration and the board.
Thank you. Member DeLagrange would move to approve 6.1.5, policy JGA, corporal punishment.
All right, do we have a second?
Member Wilkins, second.
Thank you, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say yes.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. 6.2, approval of IDT transfer request. Do we have any transfer requests?
Director Cantor is prepared to speak to any questions the board would have or give an explanation prior to the board conversation.
Sure, we can do it real quickly. So, one thing that we do know fairly accurately with enrollment is how many kindergarten students have signed up to be in the district. There was no corporal punishment involved, but Susan did reach out to the office managers and make sure that they had numbers. So we know that we have room for the additional 13 students that we are making the request for. So you can see there's 309 total students across the district signed up for kindergarten as of today. The next lowest grade would be second grade, where there are 362 students signed up. So if we were to accept all 13 students, we would not be in danger of going over 20 students in the classes where we would allow those students to come. So that's why we're recommending that we go ahead and accept those 13 students who also applied by the time the deadline was there. So.
What if all the children come when the school buses show up? Will that affect anything?
Well,
If our enrollment increases?
we would have to have an awful lot of them come.
We're 100 down, remember, in kindergarten, so I don't think 13 are gonna.
Okay.
We are actually, well, we have some very small classes, let's put it that way, at some schools. Brian, did you have a question?
No, I was same as Cassie.
Okay.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Member Neville, motions to approve 6.2.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Member DeLagrange, second.
Any further discussion? All in favor of 6.2, approval of IDT transfer request, please say yes.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. And lastly, approval of GHS communication careers. You heard about this evening. We have a motion to approve.
So moved. Member Wilkins.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Brownell, second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say yes.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Action items are taken care of for this evening. Item 7.0, future meeting dates and suggested agenda items. 7.1, board workshop, Tuesday, September 14th at 4 p.m. If you'll please note the time, we will be beginning our training for the scholarship. I won't try to say the name because I butcher it every time. 7.2, board meeting Tuesday, September 14th at 5 p.m. and then our board meeting on the 28th at 5 p.m. So,
Chair. Just with regards to the property and facility committee, I believe previously we met every meeting, like every 2 weeks. But
No,
either way,
it was prior to the first meeting of the month, Just
Perfect.
one time per month.
Perfect, that sounds good.
Chair Nelson?
Yes.
I gave incorrect advice about the policy related to voting on motions. The policy actually says a form of yes or no, which means that you could say aye.
Gary,
So
I
I
am
am
so happy to hear you say that.
I am
Thank you
freeing
for that.
everyone up
Thank
to
you.
say aye.
It's always important to
But
admit
just
when you're
because
wrong.
we respect you so much, Gary, we're just going to keep saying yes. But I appreciate your clarification on that, so. All right, we will adjourn our regular session. Thank you very much for coming. We will open our executive session in 5 minutes.